Hello, everybody, and welcome to TTV's latest interview. This time with famed music composer of the Bionicle film franchise, as well as many other series and movies over the years. The one, the only, Nathan Furst is joining us today. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that fantastic.
No problem. So, for those unfamiliar with how we do our interviews, is basically just going to be talking with Mr. Furst about his work on the Bionicle film franchise, all of his other films over the years, music in general, how he got into it, and you may learn a couple new interesting insights about the business and how everything works if we're lucky. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Yeah, no pressure at all. It's going to be fun. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves to the audience. I'm Messinek.
I'm John.
I'm Ben.
And once again, TTV interviews Nathan Furst. Let's do this thing. So, Mr.
All
Furst,
right.
I guess a good place to begin our talk for the day would be at the beginning of your career and your interest in composing music. I'd like to know how you got started. How did you first figure out this is my passion? This is something I want to do.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was really young. I think I was like 7 years old. And 7 or 8 years old. And I remember Back to the Future in the theaters. And I still remember that feeling of when I would hear Alan Silvestri's score, I want to do that. I remember that specific feeling of I want to do that. And then, but of course, you're 7 years old. It's just a thought. And then definitely again, when I was a bit older, probably almost 10, when I saw Danny Elfman's Batman score. And then,
that score.
It was that score. And when I was in the theater, when I was in the theater and I just hear score, that was a huge click. That was okay, I have to do it. And from that day, I just started tinkering on the piano. I taught myself how to play piano. We'll say play as a very liberal term. And ever since, right from the get-go, I just sort of sat down and taught myself, sort of how to play the piano only for the sole purpose of writing music. And then, of course, you have like standard, that every composer will say is, Star Wars and Indiana Jones and pretty much anything John Williams has done is just considered, he's our god, as it were. So, he really, really is. And he's just an amazing composer. So, of course, that stuff really, really, sort of lit something in me as well. But for whatever reason, it was Back to the Future and Batman that something inside of me changed, like on a chemical level almost. It was. You know what I mean? It wasn't even like
that's
the only way I could word it is it wasn't even like a thing where it's like, oh, that's interesting, or oh, I think I like that. No, it's like something inside of me physically.
That does make sense. It's like you realize this is what things have been leading to. This is what I want to do.
Absolutely.
This is my destiny.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Walking out of Batman.
That's exactly right. It's that kind of a thing where it's like, good thing it's been, I'm lucky that it's been working out because there really was no other option. It's like, well, this is what happens next. And so, and that's what I did all through, ever since I was probably 11.
Wow.
Anything else I was doing besides writing music was sort of, whether it was school or whatever else, it was really just sort of like a side peripheral existence. Like I went to school because I had to.
Basically,
it was
an obligation.
Yeah. It's an obligation, and then when I'm done with the obligation, I get down to the real work, and I sat.
Oh yeah, can relate.
Yeah, so there you go, man. So are one of you guys musicians or something, or composer or something?
Vin dabbles in it, yes.
Yeah,
not so much me and John.
I've played guitar for a couple of years, and I also composed music for the channel. Not really so much compose, but more like mix stuff down on like the music making software and stuff like FL Studio, Mixcraft, etc.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's in the same, that's a cousin of this. It's all good. But yeah, that's, so that's it for me.
Fantastic as far as origin stories go.
Yeah.
So you said that your first instrument was the piano?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even claim I have an instrument. Piano the piano's the thing I can sort of claim that I can play. And if you were to put me on the spot, I would probably be able to fool you and let you think, and to make you think that I play. But I'm really just faking it. I just sort of, but yeah, I mean, obviously I write on a piano, and my recording studio is all piano based. And then anything else I, quote unquote play is really just a necessity of whatever I'm working on at the time. So, I don't play guitar, but I learned how to play enough guitar, when I'm speed. You know what I mean? It's just, you just sort of
like basic chords or
chords
or
chords, notes, or just a technique. And often it's unconventional. So, for example, for Need for Speed, I bought several guitars, and I just kept them all tuned differently because I just tuned them to what seemed to make sense to me. So I'll do a lot of that. So I won't follow traditional tuning, and I'll just sort of figure it out so that it works best for me in whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it depends on what you're doing. So,
you need to have adaptability.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it may seem like it's really just one of those. It's a necessity out of function, right? So if I've written a theme or something, if I tune the guitar a certain way, well, then I'll be able to play that specific theme more easily. Now, could I then do an entire set with the Grateful Dead? No, but not with that tuning. But it was just for that tuning, for that one thing. It's great.
All right.
Yeah.
What do you guys want to go next?
Sure. Well, I was actually wanted to comment on one thing that you mentioned beforehand, which is the Batman score. It's so cool that you're talking about seeing it in theaters and coming out of the theater experience. Because my first experience with that theme was the Lego Batman game that they made.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Kind of tying everything together, and they had a demo. I couldn't even afford the game. I was a kid. You could download the demo. And they give you a little demo thing, and they just have that theme playing as the background music.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, no. So I played that level a billion times because I was a kid, and you don't have anything else to play. It's a free demo, but that theme is etched into my mind. It's so good, and I think
it's great.
Even compared, Hans Zimmer did some of the more recent Batman stuff, but
a good theme and a good soundtrack can make or break any media.
It really can,
because it can set the mood perfectly.
Oh, sorry, you guys dropped out for it. But you're back now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So okay. So I'll take it back. Yes, it's the theme just spoke to me, and what the other composers have done for Batman franchise is really awesome too. It's a different thing, and and who knows, if I was 10 years old and seeing The Dark Knight in the theater, maybe it would affect me. Maybe that would affect me. And it's that's an awesome score in its own right, but it's just a different thing,
Right.
Yeah, that stuff seems to be more textural based.
Right.
And it just has these really awesome and interesting, sort of colors and stuff. But for me, just to hear that theme loud and clear, nothing else is going. Just the confidence of just letting this thing out that Elfman did, it's just amazing. I mean, and Elfman I was a huge fan of Elfman, sort of growing up. So of course, when I saw when I saw Edward Scissorhands and stuff, it's just that score is just insane. It's just this amazing work that you've heard ripped off so many times because it was so good. It was great.
See, it's interesting that you bring up the score for Batman, because I definitely agree that score is really great. And the greatest thing that I personally find about it is that it gave those movies such a nice identity. You walk into the theater, you're watching the Batman movies, something's happening, and then you hear dun, 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 and then you know stuff's about to go down. Batman's about to come in, do the thing, and
absolutely,
yeah. And I felt like you also accomplished that with Bionicle score.
Thank you.
Because the one thing that always comes to mind when I think of the old Bionicle movies was the one for Mask of Light, and it's like dun, 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 dun.
That's like
so nice. It's so light
and become incredibly iconic within that.
It's very iconic.
It's so funny. Yeah, you don't think that when you come up with these things in a room by yourself, that sort of people are actually going to end up listening to it. You know? It's not really, at least for me, it's just not part of the like for me in my head, it's just like, oh, this will be nice. When I come up with the idea, but it's kind of funny, to me, that was at the time, that was like just a little side, nice, sort of like friendly theme for those, I forget the character's name, say it's, it was Jala?
Jala.
You got it right. Yeah, you got it correct.
That's going back to my. For those guys, it was just kind of like a friend theme, and I thought it was just a nice little moment. And then it's of course like I get links from people, and it's just like, here's some kid in, I don't know, Lithuania who's playing your theme at a party. You know what I mean? He's playing your theme at a party, and like it's not winning them over, but the kid's enjoying himself.
That's great.
Yeah,
it's so true. It's so funny. But yeah, thank you.
Well, it's because with the Bionicle franchise in particular that the music for that theme evolved over the years. There's many different kinds of genres that Bionicle claims to have, but I would say out of the bunch, obviously people's preferences may disagree, but I would say that the music in the Bionicle film trilogy was perhaps the most, I would say, iconic. I think it's set the bar to a higher standard for that particular thing. Like, all right, yeah, music is important because it sets the tone of something, and it also gives it an identity.
I remember watching Legends of Metro Nui for the first time, and how like Leakon's theme transitions into the Bionicle theme, or I guess the friend theme in the end, and that's been one of my favorite arrangements.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, when I'm writing, I try to do that where when I'm sort of setting out, where either I'm reading the script or I'm watching the footage for the first time, I'll try to write themes that I know can sort of end up becoming intertwined, and I'll write them that way initially. So I'm thinking, okay, well, we'll do this theme for Leakon, which sort of can be considered almost like a second cousin of the main Bionicle theme, and then in the end, when you really come, in that big, huge end, then I can sort of start stacking them on top of each other, playing with, you get a sprinkle of the main theme, and then the Leakon thing comes in, and then, and then that could sort of just become.
That's a very good idea, actually.
Yeah, so I think about that ahead of,
there's, I feel like a lot of the modern like a lot of some of the newer films, specifically because like I'm a Marvel fan, and then I've gone to see all these movies, and this video went viral like last week, a couple days ago, I guess, about how like there's still not really like a theme to the Marvel universe, on screen, like how I can sing the Star Wars theme and like the Harry Potter theme and like all these other themes, but not the Marvel theme, because they're more texture based, and but they don't have like character themes that like stack again. And for Civil War, I was really hoping to get like the Captain America theme and the Iron Man theme and have them and it didn't feel like it had this connection across all the movies. Do you see like that trend in like movies? I guess what do you think about that?
I agree. I actually know the video. Somebody actually last week sent me that video, and it's really funny because I completely agree with it. And I don't think it's for a lack of capability.
Right.
I think there's just this trend where there's this belief system that music, there's this sort of new thing going on, relatively new, that music should be, film music should not be noticed. And I'm not quite sure how and when that became a thing, because I completely disagree. I think it's bad when film music is noticed in a way where you're being removed from the story. Then obviously the music is not serving its purpose. But this idea that basically film music should be sort of just well-produced music library is not something I do in my work and that I subscribe to personally. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that a film has a very specific identity, from a music standpoint, and that doesn't mean it needs to necessarily be a hummable theme. Sometimes textual writing is the right choice. But if you look at and back in the day, I think movies to accomplish that in a unique way. So could you hum a theme from The Shining? Probably not. But if you started to hear it, you would be like, "Oh, that's from The Shining,"
right.
Because it took a very specific approach. Excuse me. But yes, no, I completely agree, and I'm proud to say that one of my things that writing a theme, a hummable theme, is pretty much embedded in how I work.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps me and hurts me or hurts me in this business, but it is what it is.
No, yeah.
It is what it is.
I feel like one of the strongest soundtracks that I've heard from any kind of newer media stuff that's kind of like a new franchise or a new thing that doesn't have anything to draw back upon, like the new Star Wars movies or whatnot. I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones or know of the music there, but they have done really well with keeping these humble themes for all there's a ton of characters, but almost all of them have their own theme. A lot of the locations have their own theme, and when you see them in the show, they're layered. Sometimes the two themes on top of each other, or themes will go from one character's theme to another as they're being trained by this person, or as things happen in the plot. So yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I do. I love Game of Thrones. I watched that show. I'm one of, I wouldn't say I've gone so far as that I'm addicted to it, but it's definitely, I can hum the main theme,
right.
the main titles. I guess I didn't notice, I haven't noticed the score as much, but there's definitely a signature to the sound of that show.
Right.
That I noticed, which is fantastic.
So,
and I wish more shows, and especially film. That's the other thing that's weird about how things. There's been this sort of weird switch where TV music used to be the whatever cheesy, you just got through it kind of a thing, and then film was where you got these real scores. And what's actually seemed to be a trend, which is bizarre to me, is there's been a swap, and now film music is generic and forgettable 80% of the time, it seems. But then these TV shows have spent the time, the money, and the resources to create a sound for the show.
Right.
Found that's been a really interesting switch. I'm not sure how that's happened, but it's just like you couldn't hum the Marvel theme, any Marvel movie really, but you can hum. You can hum the Game of Thrones, main title, right?
Right.
And I think, unless I'm mistaken, the composer for Game of Thrones did one of the Marvel movies.
I think you're right. I believe he did, and it's
right.
Right.
So it's Ramin Djawadi. I think he did Iron Man. There's no real recognizable theme.
You would be correct. He did do Iron Man.
Yeah, he did Iron Man, but Game of Thrones has a theme, right?
Right.
But Iron Man really just kind of it's just cashmere,
right?
It's that sort of da-na-na,
yeah. That's exactly. And even with that too, that doesn't even carry from one movie to the next. Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 have different themes.
I really
same thing Captain America.
Iron Man 1's soundtrack because that really. I don't know, just that like you said, the cashmere type of style that it had going throughout the movie. I feel like really gave it that sense of identity. They kind of brought it back with Iron Man 3. I feel.
But I mean, it's still
not the theme, but they brought back that whole thing where it has its own identifiable soundtrack that you can remember.
Well, I feel like it's a tone, like you said, it is a tone that helps a movie, and that's the thing of textures that is able to get
absolutely
that feel, the industrial kind of thing
absolutely.
of that movie.
I think tone is important, and that's a valid conversation. Any composer, there are John Williams, our Messiah, right? He would, he'll have a conversation. Absolutely, it's not all the notes on the page, but it's who's playing those notes, and that's important from film. However, I would say just for personally, my preference, tone is half of the conversation. You know what I mean? It's not the whole conversation. So
right.
And I maybe it's a thing with studio executives, maybe it's a thing with some directors, I'm not sure. But I think just when they start to hear a theme that they can recognize, somehow the artistry of that sort of pulls them out for a second, and they get upset that they feel like it might be pulling out of the story. I don't know. That's
right.
Sure. I'm sure that's part of the thought process. I just don't personally agree with that.
Yeah, no, I don't either. And luckily, the people I work with tend to not agree with that either. So,
there you go.
So and that's the point of being an artist in Hollywood is you sort of meet up with different people and when you're sort of like-minded or close to like you guys are on the same page, then that usually creates a great working relationship, like a John Williams and Steven Spielberg or Silvestri and Robert Zemeckis and Danny Elfman and Tim Burton, it accomplished that. So but I think he was compelled for whatever reason to use Ramin Djawadi for the first one, but then brought in John Debney for the second one, and then I think someone else started directing the third one. I can't remember.
It was Shane Black. Yeah.
Shane Black.
Shane Black.
So then who composed the third one? Is that Brian Tyler?
I believe it is Brian Tyler, actually.
Okay, yeah. So then and then that's going to be the thing with Jon Favreau, that's a little bit unusual. Usually a director with a similar sound. Because it's the same director. But in that specific case, there were other things at play for the first one. And then with the second one, Jon Favreau brought in his guy. And so that's the reason why it sounds different. But for all three movies, you have different composers. So then now the Iron Man franchise has no, a musical continuity.
That's right. That's always bothered me about them.
And it's just the way it is. And I think that because it didn't start out with a strong theme, there might have not been any compelling reason to tip. There was no compelling reason for the next composer to tip his hat to the previous composer, right?
Right.
John Debney comes in for two, and it's like, okay, one is Kashmir. So I'm gonna do this instead, and then
it's a thing where since there isn't an established identity, there's no drive to create one.
Right, exactly. And the truth is even movies that the composer, obviously, people underestimate. A composer often will, the orchestra is his fundamental tool, right, for film music usually. At least on the scale that we're talking about. We're having a discussion about Bionicle and then on Marvel movies. And so people tend to underestimate, how unique you can an orchestra sound. Because this orchestra doesn't all sound alike, right? So you put, Ramin Djawadi for first Iron Man, guitars and drums, so that's going to be a different thing. John Debney, I don't know these scores, tends to use the orchestra widely, so I'm assuming it sounds orchestra-centric. I know Brian Tyler, the orchestra, but the way, the style and the maneuvers that they use to manipulate the orchestra the way they want, even when you sort of nod to the theme, it still doesn't quite have the majesty of John Williams, right?
Right.
And also, by the way, vice versa. Maybe a John Williams score won't quite have the elegant drive of an Alex Plot score, which is the guy who I think finished the series, right? For Deathly Hallows or whatever those things are. So, just every composer is different. It's going to be a different sound. So when you start bringing in a different guy and there's no theme to revisit, then yeah, that's how you're going to start getting sort of the Marvel, musical soup
Right. Even like I was looking up this as well. Danny Elfman actually composed Age of Ultron alongside Brian Tyler. So even if, like, you know, again, it's not just for lack of trying. Like, these people don't have like the capacity or the knowledge or, you know, the talent in order to do it. It's just
that's interesting. He's credited that. Well, I'm not sure what's going on with Age of Ultron. I don't really follow the Marvel stuff all that much.
Right.
I mean, there's no way they work together. Somebody started it and somebody else. I don't know which order. I don't know if Brian Tyler started it and Danny Elfman finished it, or vice versa. But that's going to be, I promise you, that's going to be a case of there might have been a schedule issue, or they didn't like some of the score, so they brought in another composer to write, you know, the last reel of the movie, you know, or something.
That would make sense.
You know, something like that, which does happen, you know, so, you know, if one composer comes in and writes the score and everybody's really happy with it, but for some reason, you know, the last, you know, the big fight at the end isn't just not working for everybody. You know, it could be a number of things. Either they decide to go to another composer right away, or they go back to the first composer, but now the first composer's onto another movie and he's unavailable.
Yeah, I think that is what happened, because from what I'm seeing right now, Tyler did the primary score for the movie, not like the main theme, but he did the bulk of the work, and then Danny Elfman is credited with additional music contributing to Tyler's score. So okay, that is what happened.
And you know what? There's actually a possibility that Danny Elfman didn't write any music for it, and that credit is simply that they simply cut in, you know, maybe some of Danny Elfman's music from Hulk or something. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens. It's you know, and you have to listen carefully sometimes to catch that. It does happen. It does happen.
So I have something I kind of want to ask, based on something you were talking before about, you know, making themes that are hummable and making, like, you know, stuff that, for better luck of term, like, you know, kind of sticks. It's kind of, you know, iconic, hummable, that whole thing. How do you like, to you, what makes a piece of composition like that? Like, what goes into that makes something stick with people?
Oh God. I don't know, man. I'll let you know when I find out. Because, you know, I'll be honest. Like, I've written some things. You know, I guess, you know what it is it's like, I just try to get in the headspace of a combination of our characters or whatever it is, and then also the headspace of my director. So, you know, I'm thinking, I when I'm writing ideas and themes, I think simultaneously, you know, what is our character going through? What is their journey, and what is the point of their journey? And then I'm also thinking, okay, what is my director trying to say about this journey, or what is his perspective, right? Because my job is not to tell the story of the movie the way I want necessarily. My job is to help the director tell the story he wants to tell. So, you know, and that will guide me sometimes to, you know, cuter, sweeter, happier, sadder, darker, whatever it may be, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
You know, and I would argue that the better composer always is thinking about what his director wants. And because nobody, you know, I can't imagine a situation, and I certainly haven't experienced it, can't imagine a situation where the director is not the most emotionally invested person in a movie. So whether you know, if you're working on a film, whether you necessarily see the director's vision, like whether that vision makes sense to you off the bat or not, is sort of irrelevant. That director is most likely the most emotionally invested and personally invested you know, human being telling this story. So to say they're probably right.
Yeah.
And then it's your job to sort of how to tell it. Try to think of a good example. That's not me. You know what's a great example is again the Harry Potter stuff. It's like you listen to what John Williams did for first movie, and it's a very John, you know, for Chris Columbus and stuff. And then listen to what he did for the third movie. Is it the third movie where it was Alfonso Cuarón?
Yes, yeah.
Prisoner in Azkaban, and it's
yes,
just it very much fits Alfonso Cuarón, who that's the tone of the story he tries to. And so I certainly try to do that. Sorry, I'm giving you long-winded answers here. I actually
This is what we're looking for. We're looking for insight.
Exactly what we're looking for. We love doing this.
Why make your job harder, right? Just make it so
right.
you just ask me one question, and then you guys can go get a sandwich or something.
Basically,
we can come back later.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. Post.
Exactly. So for me, what I'm looking for when I'm writing a theme is I'm thinking of those things of how do I accomplish, sort of being the music, being the character in a musical way, doing, approaching the character and the story from the same angle, through the same facet or prism that the director is trying to do it from. And then the last component is are those things clicking in a way to me that I think would affect the audience in a positive way, in the correct way. So, and I, it's one of those things where I only know it. I couldn't give you a list of of what I do or how it's done. I only know when I've done it. So, it's one of those things and it can be really frustrating and really, really exciting. So, it's one of those things where it's like you're picking a lock, kind of, and you'll only know you did it when it's done. It's kind of one of those things. And when the puzzle locks in, and it's the best feeling in the world. And until then, it's massively frustrating. I think for the Bionicle theme, I spent the better part of 2 weeks on Mask Alight, maybe 3 weeks.
Wow.
I wasn't even in the studio. I was just sitting in front of the piano trying to write themes and ideas. And I would, it's just one of those things that, when you wake up in the morning at 9 a.m., you approach it and you're going to do it, and you're the best composer who ever lived, all that stuff. And by 1 o'clock, you realize you're terrible at what you do. Give up now. And you just keep going and then all of a sudden, what happens? One day you realize, oh, wait a minute, this path I was working on is actually right. I just need to do this, this, this. And maybe if I move it, maybe if I move the chord to this while, moving the note over here, and then it becomes this thing, and then all of a sudden it locks in. And once it locks in, for me, once those elements click and I know it's right, writing the score becomes a relatively simple concept to me. Because now it's just about putting in the time to write the sheet.
The hardest part is over.
But yeah, but the hardest part for me, at least, is over, which is what's the right thing to be doing. How should I be spending the next 80 minutes of music? What is it I'm trying to say? And once I figure out what it is I'm trying to say and how I need to say it, then the rest is not that big of a deal. Bob's your uncle, as they say. So,
right.
But yeah, so for the Mask of Light, I think at least 3 weeks. Something like that. I remember it well. I had written some music for them as an idea, and they loved it, and they hired me. And I didn't have a grand piano. And so I ran out and I bought a grand that sounded good to me. And I had it sent to the house. And I literally, the first thing I've ever done on that piano is I wrote the Mask of Light themes and sat in front of that piano for 2-3 weeks. And
wow.
that is still the piano I use today.
Wow.
I bought it specifically to be inspired. Because for me anyway, there's a massive difference between when I'm writing the substance of a score, like what the meaning of a score is, like themes and stuff like that. I need to be sitting at a piano where I hit something and sound waves are resonating against wood and hitting me back in the face. I cannot be in a digital environment and really feel like I'm doing my job. So, and so for every score I've ever written since has been on that same piano, but the first score I ever wrote was Mask of Light with that piano.
That is quite awesome. Well, while we are talking about Bionicle, I suppose the question would have to be asked: how were you first approached to work on that project? Are there any interesting stories behind how Lego first contacted you, Miramax?
Oh, let me try to think. Oh, I'm trying to think. There was a contact. What is the contact? I'm trying to remember now. Oh my God! Yeah,
I understand if you don't. It's been like 13 years.
I know
it's
been a long while.
Like, well, that was a very special. Obviously, it was a very special movie. I started young, and then I ended up getting a job like basically ghostwriting for a couple composers. If you guys don't know what ghostwriting is, it's where a composer, often for no other reason, there's just too much work for one person. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with capability. Will hire other composers to write cues, a piece of music in a movie, and obviously their name's not going to go on it. It's going to be the other composer, right? So,
yeah.
And I had done some stuff for a guy with a wonderful problem, which was that he had 10 shows at any given time he had to do. So I was writing one of them, and I had it was a cartoon, but it was mostly like sort of like. It was more modernized. It was very much like the Matrix had only come out a few years earlier, so everybody was still sort of digging on that sort of like big beat techno-y thing, right?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that, and then I just sort of auditioned for Bionicle because I'd finished that show. I didn't have anything else going on at the moment, and I was 22, and my childhood. I swear to God, this is crazy. My childhood dentist was cleaning my teeth, and his brother knew the producer for the Bionicle movies.
Wow!
He was cleaning my teeth, and he was asking me how things were going. And I said things are going well. I finished my I finished that series I was working on. And now I got now I'm just looking for the next thing. I don't have anything going on. And he says, "Hey, you should reach out to my brother." And I said, "Who's your brother?" He says, his name's Tim, and he runs a post-production, house, and he has a good friend who's looking for a composer for this movie called Bionicle.
Wow.
And I was like, sure, okay. Like I didn't think anything. I was like, sure, why not? So my dentist, again, my childhood dentist, the guy who's been cleaning my teeth since I was like 9, gives me his brother's number. I go out to lunch with him. He says, "Hey, just give me he's a nice guy." And he says, "So I know these people. They have a company called Creative Capers, and they're going to be making this movie. And I know they're looking for a composer." And he's like, "So if you want, just like give me a demo of some music you've done, and send it to me, and I'll forward it to them." And I said, "Okay, do you know what they're looking for?" He says, "I think they're looking for like big, epic." I said, "All right." So I sort of actually just wrote some stuff. I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't at the time I didn't have any epic material under my belt, like any sort of big orchestra score that I had done. So I actually just wrote an idea that I think in some way ended up becoming the theme of Bionicle, but it wouldn't be recognizable if you were to hear it now, I don't think. So I sent it in maybe like probably a month later, hear back that they liked the demo and they wanted to come in and talk to me. So I came in and I met with them, and they were showing me drawings that they had. Really, I think it was just storyboards, which is, storyboard is, before you've, actually rendered anything. I would say shot anything, but it's so.
Right.
Right. So I'll just say shot anything before you've shot any footage. Sometimes what you'll do is you'll create a storyboard, which essentially just looks like a really cheesy graphic novel. It's just like pencil, and it basically marks like what the framing of the camera would be, where the camera's going to go, and sort of in a very general way, like what are you looking at, and literally like your character will be like a stick, will be like a circle with a whatever, to be like holds up mask of light while camera pans left, and the screen will flash and it'll go to the next comic frame.
Right.
So they showed me some of that, and they're talking to me about it. I'm hearing it. I can hear they had recorded the actors. So they had generally sort of cut the dialogue to this like sort of comic strip thing I'm watching. And they said, what do you think? We'd love to hear what your ideas for this would be. So then they sort of were just telling me all about the universe they didn't give me a script or anything. They just started talking to me about what Bionicle was, what its sort of mythology is, and the world that is Bionicle. That's sort of that entire universe. I remember that first meeting there was very little discussion about the actual movie. Like there was very little discussion about
interesting
the real characters and what's going to happen in this actual movie. The conversation was broader. It was more about like Lego has these toys Bionicle. This is the mythology for that entire sort of wing of Lego. And,
that's very interesting to me because Bionicle fans, that's how they view it as well. The mythology is arguably the most important thing. So
right. That's
nice
cool,
to see that is a shared opinion. By
Definitely. By the time I left that meeting, I had more of what's the place called? Matanui, is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, I'm working off of memory now.
Oh, it's okay. I would remember things I learned in like school 13 years ago. So.
There you go. So right. So I knew more about the place, I think, when I walked away from that meeting than I did about Jala and is it Takua?
Yep.
Takua.
Oh my God, am I right?
Yep.
You are right.
You've
been actually been like pretty spot on for all these answers.
And I swear I'm not looking this up at all. I'm going. So I knew very little about them. It was more about like Nui and the Toa.
Yep.
And those guys, and sort of it was more about that. Can you write a theme about that universe? And the idea that there's these sort of I think at the time I don't know if it's been developed since time. There was no origin. There really was no origin story that I was aware of. It was just basically that they're robots, but they're not. They're like biological.
Yeah.
They're biological, but there's no origin story. There's no like exact conversation about how they came to be or how it.
Well, since then, that all got developed. But
that all got developed.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Since you've worked on Bionicle, it's been canceled and then revived and then canceled again.
Yeah. No, it's so it was this
been through the ringer.
Yeah, right. So, but at the time, it was just a thing that was like it was, and it was its own world, and we accepted that.
Yes.
We just know it's not Earth. We know that it's an Earth-like planet or universe. So what would my ideas be for a universe that is like that? With these sort of these keepers of this world, like in a positive way that that the Toa are. And that's when I went home and I just came up with an idea or a theme, and I sent it to them, and again probably another month later, and I got a phone call that they wanted me to compose the music for Alight. And then that was it. And then it was like, okay. And then and then I watched the whole. I watched pieces of the movie because it was kind of weird how it was made. I never saw the whole movie at one, from beginning to end, until it was almost done. I knew what was going to happen, but I was writing the music while animation was coming in, so I actually didn't get to see. I think in Alight, there's even some moments where I created turns in the music based off of where I think this thing is going to happen. And I was right 90% of the time, or really, really close. So, but yeah, and then I basically just sat there for 3 weeks and wrote those themes. The main sort of what I call the arcing Bionicle theme.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I got you.
yeah, exactly. And then that sort of secondary thing.
Yep.
That's sort of
that
just
music.
Nostalgia.
I think that was the first thing. I think that was the first thing was that sort of like bum 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 bum. You know, that sort of thing was the first thing I came up with. Then that theme, and then we get into sort of the stuff. And then
Yes.
I want to say I had another theme for them that I can't quite remember. I'm trying to think of what it was, but anyway, it was all in that. I'm actually walking to my now. It's if that's all right by you guys.
I'm perfectly
I don't
fine.
even know how it'll feel, because that could be fun, right? So, can you guys hear that?
We can hear that.
Oh yeah, we can hear
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Wow.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That's
But then
awesome.
and then you have. I'm gonna see if sheerly by muscle memory I can figure out what it is.
Okay. All right.
So,
All right. Let's go.
that's the first.
From what I could hear, that sounded pretty spot on. It's just
Yeah,
I don't
that
think
was
the
really
microphone's picking everything
Oh.
up.
I know which one I'm thinking of. That was my other friend, which was like again muscle memory. So bear with me here. Sound familiar? I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
That sounded pretty familiar.
That
Yeah.
does sound very familiar.
Okay, yeah, I remember now.
But if you listen to it, they're very sort of they're sort of related to each other. So I could just keep moving from one to the other. And if I were writing a score, I can go straight from that to that sort of
That's fantastic.
Oh man,
The nostalgia is so real.
Oh, is that good?
That's incredible.
got goosebumps.
That's so good.
And you guys are hearing this is on the original piano.
Wow.
That is
Man.
amazing.
It's the same
History.
piano. It's the same piano. So yeah, there it is.
That-
Well, I think the moral of your story, how you got into Bionicle, how you first became involved with the project. When your dentist tries to talk to you, don't ignore him.
Oh yeah,
Make
absolutely.
conversation. It can
Absolutely.
change lives.
And that's that. I think that's a true story for anybody in the entertainment business. Is like you never know, some random person is going to be like, oh, you should talk to this guy that I'm friends with, whatever it is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Opportunity can arise in
true.
unexpected places is basically what people
Absolutely.
should take from this.
Man.
Absolutely. And you're that sort of general concept of, just be open to the world and the universe to sort of give you signs of what you should be doing at any given time,
Makes sense to me.
Don't resist. Don't
Right.
resist. Don't resist what's being told. What's being presented to you.
Just go with the flow.
Go with the
See what
flow.
happens.
It's an important thing. And trust your intuition and your gut. And so, and how did that start? Was the question? How did I get the Bionicle?
How did you get approached to work on Bionicle? Yeah,
I'm so glad it went the way it did though. I like that was so great hearing that theme from like the original, and again hearing that live
Yeah.
was spectacular.
Oh, sure, yeah.
All right. You guys have any other questions?
Man, I'm not really, but now I feel like I got to call up my dentist.
Exactly.
Get your start in showbiz. I actually had a question because I know you worked, you did Bionicle and then you went and did, a lot of other movies. You did Need for Speed. You did some other like live action stuff. Is there like really any difference between composing for like animation and composing for live action?
Oh, absolutely. From a composer standpoint, animation is actually way more freeing in a way, because you have this allowance to pull out all the stops. You're writing for animation in a big way, usually speaking. For whatever reason, whatever your story is in animation, there's one, it disconnects you. There's one extra step that disconnects you from it being real, right? Like you're no longer watching. So I think that allows you sort of permission slip to really just go for full color with the orchestra, and you don't have to think about holding back. Whereas when you're doing live action, you're always having that conversation of, is this too much for this moment? Should I be pulling back harder? And there's that thing where I guess generally speaking, when you're doing live action, you have to be careful, because less is more when you're doing live action. Right. It's like if two people are speaking, you really need to just be coming in very softly, and however you're going to touch that scene needs to be with a very elegant brush, and sort of you have to be very careful about what steps you take, because it's, for whatever reason, it's very easy to ruin a scene in live action, with probably the exception of like something like a Marvel movie, where it's so gigantic and it's you can almost go for broke on those. But in most cases, it's you have to be very delicate with your approach. Whereas with animation, you can usually just go for broke. If there's a touching moment, you can lean into it. If there's an exciting moment, you can lean into it, and you don't have to worry as much about, am I going a little over the top here? So in a lot of ways, animation can be really just a lot of fun for a composer, because if you want to do something, you just go, you go loaded for bear, you go big or you go home, just make it happen. And there's less concern. I'm not going to say no, but there's less concern that that you're overdoing it, or that you're giving something away, or as long as you're good at what you do, right? So not to give something away or whatever, you don't have to worry about the sensitivity to that.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So that's what I would say is the difference between animation and live action for the most part. Like if you just listening to the score, like what I thought was such an incredible score. If you listen to John Powell's How to Train Your Dragon, that's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that score. That score,
oh, I am.
It's incredible.
It's a really great score.
It's an incredible score. You can't. No matter how fantastical the movie, that score, if you listen to it, you can sort of tell that wouldn't be a live action score. You can sort of hear, all right, this is an animation score. You hear it. Because even if you were doing something on that scope of How to Train Your Dragon, but it were live action, you would be approaching it differently. Like even if you're doing a live action version with like CG dragons or something, you would still approach it slightly different. Because instead of just completely succumbing to a fantasy world, you're trying to create a world that seems like it might be real, right? So because of that, you don't have to pretend. You can just say, "Yep, we're watching this epic fantasy." Any of these movies, the Marvel movies, the Harry Potter stuff, even to a lesser extent, the Star Wars stuff or whatever, you're still sort of trying to do this thing like this could be real, right?
Right.
I
never even,
you have to treat it a certain way.
Yeah. I didn't think about what you were saying until you're saying, how you're you can go different with the, like live action, how it's supposed to sound a bit more real, and like animation is supposed to try to kind of make it seem like it's supposed to be real, and how like the difference between that. I was just thinking between like I've heard a lot of the soundtracks from Bond films, and then like compared to like the soundtrack of The Incredibles, which is kind of like that same type of jazzy, like bombastic trumpets, that music, but like with The Incredibles, it's so much more just big,
well, right.
and like yeah.
Exactly, because like so basically that's a great example actually. But I who said that, but I would say that's a great example because what Michael Giacchino was doing for The Incredibles, if it were an actual Bond film from that time period, because obviously he's not doing an homage to a modern Bond film. He's doing an homage to the older stuff.
Right.
In an older Bond film, that level of energy would probably be saved. Right, you might hear close to that energy in the very beginning, and then you probably wouldn't hear that energy again for like quite a long time in the movie.
Right,
or maybe the end of the movie. But when you're doing something like The Incredibles, you could just hit it with that energy all day long. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's what you do. That's what you do. One of the characters starts doing something, you could just go full hog into the theme. Usually, everything can be what you would anticipate it to be times 10. So from a composer standpoint, that's a lot of fun. I mean, imagine if somebody said, okay, here's a china shop. Go ahead and run up and down the aisles with your arms held down. You could just, like, if somebody just gave you permission to be a complete bull in a china shop, that's like incredibly fun. The idea of that.
Freedom.
Right.
So when you get to be a bull in a china shop as a composer, that can be rather freeing.
I can definitely imagine.
So I would say that's the primary difference, at least for me.
All right.
I
think one thing we should definitely ask before we begin the process of wrapping up is, are you currently involved in anything that you can publicly talk about? And would you like to promote anything you're currently doing?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a very different kind of thing. Well, I can't. I'm trying to think about what I'm allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
The thing I am allowed to is I just finished a great movie called Six Below, which is starring Josh Hartnett and Mira Sorvino, and it's kind of a really cool story about this guy who was like an Olympic. He was in the Olympics for, I think, ice hockey, and he ended up being a meth addict, and this is a true story. And he went snowboarding on a mountain, and he's high on drugs, and he like I don't know if you can hear this for your audience.
No, that's fine.
And he actually gets lost in a blizzard, and he survives for 7 days, which he shouldn't have been able to do. And he lost both of his legs. It's a crazy story, and I was
sounds like it.
Yeah, right. And I was just blessed. I got to write a beautiful score for it that was really just a little bit of a departure for me. Just this really sort of sweeping, dramatic score. It was really great, and we recorded some strings here in LA for it. It was just a beautiful thing, and I'm excited about that.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's what I have coming out that I can talk about at the moment.
Well, hey, fantastic stuff. And then I think this doesn't necessarily have to be the last question if you two have anything else that just comes to your mind, but I'll ask this anyway. It's what advice would you give to anyone who's looking to enter into the field of music composition? Anything?
Oh gosh.
Anything in particular? You don't have to go super in detail, but it's your call.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Useful. No, trust me, that's what we look for. You don't have to though.
I would say generally, I would say be adaptable. Don't come into it thinking it's going to be one thing, and you can only do that one thing. You can only go this one way, or you only write this one style. You be adaptable, be flexible, and be very good. Those are the.
I think that's good advice for anyone doing anything.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. With perhaps a couple of exceptions, mediocrity doesn't fly. You know what I mean? Like because there's a lot of people that want to do what we do, and most of them can be very good at what they do. And you got to be adaptable and
good
ready to do it.
I like that advice. It's very blunt, but very
good.
Very true. Get good or get out.
Blunt is the only way I work. It seems.
Very nice. All right. Well, Vin, John, anything else you'd like to ask before we wrap up today?
So what if I told you that the entirety...
what a great start to a sentence.
I'm kind of interested to see where he's going to go with this. Go for
that
it.
the entirety...
Are you trying to sell me a car or something?
Oh, no. Well, not today. But
Right.
What if I told you that the entirety of Bionicle story took place not just on an island, but inside of a gigantic robot that houses many different islands on its insides?
I would that is awesome, and I would totally believe that.
Well, that's what happened.
That is what happened. That was the big reveal.
So the island. So does that mean that Continuity is essentially an organ? Is
Not that island specifically. That island was actually its face.
Yeah.
A giant robot had fallen into an ocean and it had been overgrown with like vegetation and stuff.
Right. It was on top of the face.
It was
And then
on top of the face.
right.
Yeah.
So
There was this whole big thing where like they woke up the robot and he rose out of the ocean and like the island of Motunui kind of collapsed into like rubble.
Yeah,
as
it
And
was
also-
like a short animation that was released on Bionicle's website where you saw the island of Motunui looking all peaceful and everything. All of a sudden, a big robot face comes from underneath it.
You're kidding. So the stuff I would have the original trilogy that I would have done, is the robot awake then or not awake?
Not awake.
It's not awake. It's asleep.
He's not awake.
And then like
So he woke up and killed everyone.
well, everyone went inside him beforehand. Like
It's really convoluted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody-
it's so convoluted.
We're also not mentioning too that like when he comes back, the villain, if you remember from the Makuta, right?
Yeah, that's right.
He is able to possess the robot. Like he puts himself like in the mind of the robot before they turn the robot on. So they turn the robot on and think they're saving the world and everything. And it turns out they just gave him like all this like gigantic amounts of power, basically.
The robot rises, destroys the island, and then the eyes turn red, and then
and then he starts flying to another planet to destroy it.
yeah.
That sounds very convoluted.
It
it was.
at the end there.
Oh man!
Is that the end of the saga for now? Is that the end?
Well, kind of. It continued.
That's amazing.
After that, but
There's a big robot battle at the very
Yeah,
end.
they
It
got
was-
another
it was
giant robot. They
pretty
found
quick.
one
Yeah.
on the other
Well,
planet, and they
the
caught him.
important thing to realize about Bionicle that was the big plot twist with Motunui was not simply the name of the island, but Motunui was actually the spirit consciousness that was inside of the robot to start.
That's
with.
right.
Motunui,
And that the island was named after him.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
So,
so-
Motunui fought Makuta in a giant robot Rock'em Sock'em robot battle and ended up crashing his head into a moon and killing it.
So Makuta is dead then, right?
Yes.
So,
Makuta is now.
Yeah.
But then
Heroes
again, so is everybody else, or they're
Yes.
inside of him somehow.
Everyone inside of him, like when the robot body falls onto the planet after it's had his head bashed in, they all
Sure.
escape through the giant hole.
Are you
Because
serious right now?
Yeah,
I'm 100%
They're
serious.
all alive. They all.
There's like a hatch in the foot, and like they open the hatch, and they come out, and like no, they're
chilling on the new planet. Like,
Oh,
hey,
and
Wow.
everyone that died was also alive because their spirits got sent up to like another robot repair place in the red.
yeah, that's right. When people die, they get transmitted to like
Oh,
the
man.
star where they get
Yeah.
That is
now imagine
bizarre.
composing music for all of that.
that would be. I think I would just start mashing my hand on the keyboard. I think I would.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Here, this is what it is.
this is the actual.
it went off the rails a little at the end
Yeah,
there.
that sounds like that sounds like there might be a gas leak in the storytelling department. they're all getting woozy or something. I don't
Not
know.
everybody was a fan of it, to put it mildly, but
but it,
No, that
but
really
it very
doesn't
mildly.
make, no, that's actually a pretty weird.
It's unique.
Yeah,
It's
unique.
definitely
let's
unique.
call it unique. Let's call
it was because Bionicle over the years went from being the tribal kind of on the island of Motunui. It was like this tropical paradise. It went heavily into like technology and
Yeah, it went like super sci-fi near the end
super
there. And
sci-fi.
it was like
Well, that-
time travel and alternate universes and all that stuff introduced.
I
too.
I couldn't believe that because I will say that even back early on when I was working on the trilogy, there was a conversation within Lego where some people wanted it to be what it was, which was that sort of epic, somewhat organic sort of a thing. And then there was also a strong side that wanted that sort of, they wanted the score to sound like techno music, and they wanted,
Makes
and
sense.
that was luckily I won, my side won that conversation for those 3 movies. But that was, there was definitely not a clear concept of that vision.
Right.
That's one of the reasons Bionicle is loved by so many people, because it was such an amalgamation of all the different kinds of stuff. Like over the years, they had many different distinct kinds of music. After the movie trilogy ended, they went heavily into like rock music. They had the All American Rejects do stuff. It was like
they went like rock, punk,
stuff.
and then
but it doesn't help to give it a consistent musical identity. But some people,
if it works for them, that's fine. My problem with taking an epic story and defining it to either, I know that there were like some games or something at the time, or there was something going on that was breeding that conversation of maybe it should be like hip hop techno, which is what they used to call EDM. So
really?
Anybody who's anybody's over the age of 25,
right? Basically, our entire audience.
And for any of your audience that's under the age of 25, when I say house, hip hop, techno, big beat, those are all now just called EDM. So,
fair enough.
Yeah. So the problem is that for an epic story, in my opinion, that level of music, when you start doing that kind of stuff, or punk rock, it just, that kind of music tends to lay flat, and in my opinion sort of just becomes, because there's so much stuff that's EDM or rock or whatever, right? So it doesn't become, there's no way you can really make it as grandiose as the story you're trying to tell, because there's you can turn on any radio, you can turn on Pandora, and it's like a mile, like any of that says that. And so, in my opinion, it's just sort of noise that gets lost in the ether, unfortunately. So, I don't know if that's fair, that I feel that's the case, but it seems to be my consensus.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
but good story on how they.
I'm glad you said it to tell that story. I always like when people hear whatever
people hear what happened.
And then
here's something I've. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I'm just saying, and then it got canceled and then brought back.
It did
later, and then got canceled for a second time, just like a month ago. So hey.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, there was that time period, probably whatever it was, like 5, maybe 4 years ago, where like I started getting a bunch of, hey, are you doing the new Bionicle movie? What are you talking about?
In 2009 they did have a 4th Bionicle movie back before it got canceled the first time. That you
wow. Yeah, well, hey, so
and then it had a Netflix show when it came back. So
you're kidding? Wow, good for them. How did the next do after the trilogy?
The next wave after the trilogy ended. Well, that was when it heavily started to get
it was the 2006 wave, right? And it was they focused on like there's a whole tie-in with the All American Rejects. There's a lot more like all the stuff we're talking about, having the more punk rock, that kind of
after you left, things became very dark, very gritty, very edgy kind of.
They went through a bunch of different islands.
They were trying to age up the theme, I think, with the audience. Whether that worked or not, people disagree on. Some people prefer the older stuff, but the last movie you worked on, Web of Shadows, when everything became overrun by spider creatures and everything was super dark.
Right.
That was basically the beginning of that shift.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever I don't know if they ever told you this too, but like Motunui, the island and then like the giant city, where all the spiders took over and all that stuff. That was the island is actually above the city.
The island is. Oh wait. No, I didn't know that. No. Yeah.
Ever tell you that? Right. So like the sky is actually just a giant dome, and then like on top of that dome is the island. And so like at the end of one of the movies, when they go back to it, they just go kind of like down this giant stairwell all the way to get to the city underneath.
It's under Motunui.
It was underneath Motunui, yeah.
Was it Metronui, like the brain of the robot?
Metronui was the brain of the robot, yes.
That's it. I'm thinking of Metronui, and then I'm getting those confused.
Yeah, Metronui was the prequel city.
I did not know that was. Not know that. ground.
There was a lot of crazy stuff.
So one thing I do want to kind of ask was did you ever hear any talk of there being, because we never really, like, the fans never really knew why there are only 3 movies in like 2003, 4, and 5, and that kind of stopped. Was there ever talk of doing a 4th movie right after that, or was it just always meant to be a trilogy? Or
I think it was always meant to be a trilogy. You know, we had done the trilogy, and I think there was a conversation for like a hot minute about doing another set of trilogy, like another group, and then somehow that ended up just sort of falling apart. It just didn't happen. And I assumed it was, I think Lego had just decided that they were going to put, you know, Bionicle out to pasture or something, because I think shortly after I had heard that they were, like, you know, canceling the toys and all that stuff, because they did that for a minute, didn't they?
Yeah, Bionicle the toys were canceled for about 5 years. This happened in 2010.
4 years, 4 years after the last movie you did. It went on for 4 more years. You did one more movie past that in like 2009, I think. But that was like, it was supposed to be like, it was supposed to be like a whole, like 3 new movies, and then they only did one.
Plan, but then they canceled it after one, probably because you know, it just didn't work out.
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound like a good omen on that one, but
no, pretty obvious.
It was it pretty much wasn't. So
yeah, if I recall, I think Web of Shadows was doing well and was getting good feedback. Though I think everybody was saying that they liked Legends of Metro Nui more.
Yeah.
It was something like that. It was a similar conversation. It's like Empire Strikes Back is the best.
Right.
And it was like of the Legends was the best of that.
People do still regard it in high regard to this day. So.
Yeah. So that seems to be the consensus from what I've heard. So, I mean, I think Web of Shadows came out, and if I recall, there was it wasn't intense at all. It was a very casual conversation about, like, we're talking about, you know, starting like the next block of trilogy, and if I recall, they were going to try to make it a prequel.
Oh no,
that took place before Mask Alight or which, now that I'm saying that out loud, sounds like of the Star Wars stuff, but I believe. Quite recall.
Are we talking about like another prequel? Because the other 2 movies you did take place before Mask of Light.
Oh no, that's right. Yes. Okay. Sorry. No, I'm not. See, there it is. I'm getting confused. That's right. Those took place before Mask of Light. So no. Yes. Okay. So the next 3 were going to be after Mask of Light. That's what it was.
Which is what ended up happening. You were about to blow my mind. Like, did they initially plan for like a?
I was thinking too. Like, were they going to do like another prequel series in like 1,000 years back or whatever?
There was a conversation about something like that where.
Oh no.
There was something like that. You were going to get. They were talking about maybe like a Makuta origin thing, or something.
Oh,
that would have been very.
Now that would have been a movie that I would have really wanted to see.
Yeah,
and instead we got Web of Shadows.
right. No, right. I know, right. But so it was. I think there was going to be something like that, or they were going to do a hybrid where they bounced back and forth to post Mask of Light. And then it was, I can't quite remember, but it was
like a huge flashback story as they go back and forth between like Makuta's past,
or like 4th movie would be after Mask of Light, then the 5th movie would be before everything, and then I don't know. The truth
these
is,
ideas are very interesting.
I'm like, this is absolutely fascinating. I have never heard of it. Is there like anything else you can remember around that time too that were kind of just ideas that were thrown out way back when?
I'm trying to remember. No, I can't think of anything. I just remember that there was a conversation about maybe doing a Makuta origin, and then they were going to pick up, because the Mask of Light guy, what's his name?
Takanuva.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was going to be featured. He was going to be like the leader of all the Toa,
right?
Yeah,
something like that in the following movie. So there was that conversation. But again, it was all just loose stuff. I never really got, like, it's not like I know a whole story or something. It was all going to be like, we might do one and we about this.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I can remember for now. And then it was really just like, it's Lego shutting it down. That's okay.
Unceremonious end, but that's how things go.
At least from my angle, it was, because it was, we might do this, we might do that. It's really exciting. We're coming up with ideas, and then it was just like it's no more. You know, and again, is whatever's going on internally, who knows? So
yeah,
but yeah, it was I mean, it was, you know, some of the best experiences of my life writing this. I just had so much fun writing it, you know.
Well, at least there's that.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like, no, really, like, it's some of that, like, our fondest memories too is during the initial run of that line, and how, you know, how it affected us and kind of got all of us invested in what we're doing now, like videos and
part of its initial success.
A large part.
It got the word out to a larger audience.
And honestly, like, most of the people that I know now who have heard of Bionicle, like, you know, coincidentally know it from the toys and the movies. And so, like, that, you know, your work has, like, affected this, like, a huge part.
You hear very few people who ever speak it are like, oh, I heard of Bionicle through the games or the comics.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right. Always through the like, when I moved into my apartment here at my new college, like, I had a bunch of Bionicle parts that I was, you know, bringing, because I had to do stuff for the channel. And, like, people were, you know, just random people in my same apartment were helping me move in. And then everyone's like, oh, are these Bionicles? I haven't seen these movies in ages. And, like, that was, like, that's what they immediately, like, remembered, you know? It was, like, a huge part of their childhoods.
Oh, that's really cool. That's fantastic. I mean, you know, again, that's, like, some of my favorite music that I've ever gotten a chance to write over the last, you know, however many years comes from that trilogy. I mean, a lot of my ideas on, like, who I am as a composer and, like, what my, you know, because, you know, sometimes a composer has a signature, right? You always hear them sort of do the same things, or they, you know, they all have, like, sort of things that they tend to repeat, you know, where their hands tend to go when they're writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff I developed, you know, and sort of figured out, you know, who I am as a composer and what tickles my ear in the right way, you know, comes from those movies. I mean, some of the best experiences of my life are from those, you know? And it goes from the beginning.
Very
great.
nice. Well, I think it is about time we wrap up.
Yeah, I just saw the time right now. I must have knocked you guys out. Awesome.
No, honestly, like, we love it whenever people, when we get an interview and it's someone who, like, really wants to tell us and, like, you know, goes into everything. We always feel bad. Really, yeah, it's always like we always feel bad if it's like something, you know, we have to, like, kind of, you know, prod or kind of, you know, ask a lot of questions or anything. If it's a great conversation, it's exactly what we want.
When the information and the discussion flows naturally, then you know the person is actually passionate about what they're doing.
Right.
Absolutely. You know what, man? And I feel the same way. You know, there's so many interviews that I've heard, you know, from people that it's like, oh, I can't wait to hear this interview. And then, you know, it's disappointing when it's like either clear they don't really want to be doing, or they're just the type of person where to, like, get anything out of them is like trying to squeeze juice out of a rock. So.
Right. How was composing Bionicle? It was all right. You know, it was good.
It was okay.
Try to do a lot of my work, put passion in it. There you go.
Yes. Right. Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's not me at all.
I'm really glad.
I don't remember much about it. I don't want to remember anything about
it. Or it's the opposite. But you just get nothing. Which, like, you know, yeah, it was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
And then that's the answer.
Yeah. That my dentist was great. Did a good root canal. And that was
my dentist did a great job.
Did a great job.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show today and having a talk with us. We learned a lot about the business and we had a great time.
So guys, it's my pleasure.
Yeah,
it's my pleasure. I'm thrilled you guys, you know, enjoyed the music from those movies so much, and that it obviously had a lasting effect. So it makes me feel good. You know that I did something right on those.
You really did. Is there I remember at some point you were talking about, like, releasing that in some way, shape, or form, the soundtracks for original movies. Is that, like, still a conversation?
I want to do that. It took a couple of turns where it started being more hassle than it was worth. So that becomes like, I can't do this. I can't deal with this right now. I got other things I got to deal with. And then now it's sort of been permanently sort of put on the back burner. I would love the idea of it because, again, like I said, it was, you know, I loved that. You know, I'm so emotionally, you know, invested in a lot of that music, and it means a lot to me. I mean, it means a lot to me. So I would like to record it in that I feel like I could do more with it now than, say, budget and time permitted for me at that moment. What I may end up doing alternatively is, initially I was, concerned about maybe certain, legal things like, can I even release this music or not? I think we're at a point where, and some of it, unfortunately, I actually lost. I had a huge crash some years ago that hurt both the my present hard drives and my backups, and so I actually lost most of the score to to like Legends of Metro Nui. I don't even have it anymore, unfortunately. But
it's a bummer, but that's life.
It's how it goes, and it taught me a valuable lesson about backing up properly.
Yeah, we're no stranger to massive data loss either.
Exactly. And now I just realized, this is really before RAID was a thing, when I lost it. So it was just like, now it's pretty safe because, things tend to back themselves up now. But at the time, you really had to be. At the time I had this massive crash, you had to be really diligent and organized. I'm neither of those things. So, but anyway, at this point, I'm actually thinking it's probably going to be, and I started to, of just sort of just putting the music that exists out there. I know I have all of the original Mask Alight score, and I might just, upload it at some.
Well,
that would be really great. I mean, speaking as a fan, I know there's a lot of legal, and whatnot, but as someone who really enjoyed that score,
cool.
It would be nice. Awesome. We'll see what happens in the future.
We'll see what happens, and if I do something like that, you guys will be one of the first to know.
Awesome.
All right,
awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, sir, for coming on today, and I'll go ahead and give us an outro. So thank you all very much for listening to this interview with Nathan Furst, composer of the Bionicle film trilogy. If you'd like to follow him on social media, what's the name of your Twitter handle? Or any other?
Great question. I think it's just Nathan Furst.
Well, there you go.
All right. Do you have any other website or Facebook page or something that you keep up with?
I do have a Facebook fan page. Again, I think if you search Nathan Furst, you'll find me there.
Well, there you go.
And then of course I'm all over iTunes.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you all very much for listening to our interview with Nathan Furst. I'm Meso.
I'm John.
I'm Ben.
And farewell, everyone.